Hello everyone, and this is Mark DiMattei, also known as Marked Arts, but today this is the first tutorial I'm doing, and I'm going to do gradient mesh, and we're going to do a walkthrough of how to do a completely realistic rendering of. I have a model image that we're going to pull up in a bit, but I'm basically going to show you like the whole thing. I'll fast forward here and there, but primarily I'm gonna show you like the tutorial on how to do it, and like, well, not necessarily. There's no really like right way, but there's techniques and there's things that I do that will make the drawing stand out.
Sorry we can't get to the phone. Leave a message.
But primarily, I'm going to show you my technique and how I get to point A from point B, and I'll show you right here. I'm gonna pull it up on the screen if I didn't do it already. Just images that I've done before, like, or just an image that I've done before, and I can actually pull that up. Alright, so we're going to start out basically by making a new file to import. I'm going to work in 2560 by 1440 for this because that is the size of my screen. You don't have to do that. I'm just going to do that for the sake of the video recording, etc. And how, just so everything lines up a little bit. So I think I'm going to do just like the basic tutorials like everything else online eventually. But for now, I'm going to just hop into the editing and the drawing and the rendering of the realisticness of the model. So I'm just going to skip all this right now. I'm just going to set it up. So I'm going to set it up the way I wanted to set it up. We'll see if we need to change anything later or if I want to, but I'm just going to do realistic rendering tutorial walkthrough 1. Okay. Alright, so we're just going to make that. We don't need bleed or anything. I'm going to change the size in a second. I left it as small, non-pixels. But I'm just going to hit Control R and then right click the ruler to pull up the measurements. And then I'm going to use the artboard tool to basically set up the size I just said. Alright, so here we go. We have our artboard now. This is my layout. It might not, be necessary to its entirety for this tutorial, but let's get right to it. So I'm going to import the model image I found so we can draw it. Let me just go navigate in my my labyrinth. Alright, so we're going to place it in. It's a little bit smaller than the resolution, but we're going to enlarge it. It doesn't really matter. We're going to draw over it. It's not going to really make or break the drawing. If it doesn't, if I have to zoom in a little bit, it still has, high resolution. We should be fine for the drawing, so we can see all the details. Just going to match it to the size like there. So that's fine right now. So I thought this would be a good image to work with because if you're doing realistic renderings, you probably want to at least draw a face at some point. So I found an image of a complete face. It's just some non-copyright image, and I'm just gonna go OG image right here. This is the background. We're gonna lock it, and then we're gonna just make a new layer. So now I just want to stress making layers. I'm gonna bounce around like the screen like that. It's a habit. I'm sorry for all your eyeballs. But basically, new layers are important because we're going to be working in a lot of separate outline modes. And outline mode basically is if you hit Control Y, you can see all the lines. Like if I'll just add lines here, you'll just be able to see them. Like so, this is what it looks like in outline mode. It just sees everything. So eventually, we'll see our entire drawn face in outline mode. But I don't always want to have everything in outline mode. Sometimes I only want to have separate layers in outline mode. And you can do that by control clicking the eyeball on the new layer. That's going to come pretty in handy down the line. Alright, so we're going to start out by using the gradient mesh tool. Just going to get ready here. So I think usually I start out drawing and leaving a background layer of the entire edge of the face. And again, I'm not going, we're just going right into gradient mesh. We're not doing a full-on tutorial here. This is hopefully reaching out to people that already know the basics of Illustrator and are looking to learn something more. So I'm just going to go right into it. So I start out by using the rectangle tool, the rectangle marquee tool. You can hit M on the keyboard for that, but for that tool, for some reason, I always just click on it. I find that certain tools you'll click on, certain tools you'll hotkey to, but everyone has their thing. So I'm just gonna. It doesn't have to be a square. It could be really any of these shapes. I mean, we want to avoid like the polygon and star for this, but and really the rounded rectangle. So really you're just left with using the ellipse or the rectangle to start out with. But we always want to start out with a solid shape. I'm most likely or probably going to break this video up into multiple parts because gradient mesh is something, and this is just what to expect here. Gradient mesh is going to take you a very long time. It's not anything that's quick. If you can imagine someone drawing something realistically in person, it's almost the same, if not longer, depending on how detailed you want to get, how detailed you want it to get. So this is going to eat up a lot of your life. So if this is something for maybe school and you just need to learn how to do this, and for a project, you need to set aside some time for that. Or if you're just already aware of the tool and you're starting to do this, then prepare yourself for some hours and some tedious work. It's not anything that is not tedious. It takes a while. So, but it's interesting and I think it's fun. It's just fun clicking and using the tools in Illustrator. So anyway, besides that rant, we're going to keep going. So what I start out doing is we're going to basically take the gradient mesh tool, which is this right here, this little swirly thing with the rectangle, and then we're going to make sure we click the center. And we're going to also make sure that the square, rectangle, whatever shape you chose is white. So we can see the color better. You don't want to start out with anything. You just really want to start with white because we're going to fill in the color and you'll see. So if we start with the blank slate, that's the best. So we want to click the center point, and only the shapes have center point. If you were to take, if you were to make a shape with the pen tool, and this is why I stress the shapes, we have to start out with the shapes. They don't have a center point. So now this creates a problem with geometry eventually down the line where things won't necessarily work correctly, as opposed to when you have a center point and the shape always knows where the kind of like almost like a horizon kind of knows where the boundary is, and we'll continue on from that. So I'm going to rotate this here because I'm like, all right, so we're on the topic of center point here. So if I think about the center point, we have to take this square, because this square will eventually, what we're doing here is this is the face. So we're doing the face background. I'm going to do the face actually background. So right now we're doing if you ever painted, you do base layers and you do multiple layers of color. So this is kind of what this is. So we're going to start out by creating this outer shape. So this shape has to be that. So what we're going to do is find the center point of the face almost. So in 3D, and I'll show footage right here. This is the, actually we could probably just open it maybe. We'll see. Let's just do it right now. Let's just throw it in there really quick. That is not good. Alright, so we're not going to show the Maya face. Let's remember that. Failure to import anything. Alright, so... Alright, and we're back. Alright, so we're going to place this center point, I think. Usually I kind of just follow the center path of the face. So if we think as this, if you ever seen 3D before, 3D modeling, and meshes other than gradient mesh, you kind of understand where we're trying to go for. So I'm going to place this, and again with the layers, right now I kind of can't see what I'm doing. And this is why outline mode comes so important, because we need to draw, we need to be able to see the background. So if we control click the eyeball on the layer, now we can see what we're doing. We can see through the white, and we never lose the white. So if I'm just going to quickly show you, if I just fill this in with a color, like it keeps the data. So that's very important to what we're doing. So I'm going to go back in outline mode, and we're going to take the direct selection tool. I'm going to pull it out. I don't even have it out. I'm going to just bring it out of here. We're going to be using these a lot. We're going to be using the eyedropper a lot. So I might as well just pull this out. And we are going to be using this carrot a lot. So we're just going to bring all this stuff here. We can always reset the workspace to get my layout back, but nonetheless, we're doing gradient mesh. So here we go. So now what we can do is we can take these points and we can place them in logical areas where we can create this shape. Now, the square only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The square only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 exterior points. So we start out with 8, so we're going to take those 8 to start out with. We're not going to make any new points. And we're going to basically create and weld like a little plate or barrier or shape. I'm going to have to add a point over here. I can't really create anything that goes like that and then to the side with between 2 points. So we're going to just leave it like that right now. But we're doing this so we can create the exterior or the boundary of the gradient mesh within our layer. So I feel like as you watch and as you're learning, you can see why we're doing what we're doing. So we're starting out with some sort of mask of everything. Everything's going to look like a big mask. So we're just going to do this, keep going. We're just going to keep moving these points and be prepared to be moving these points for a while. I'm not going to follow the exterior of the eyelash. That's going to be a separate shape or shapes. So we're going to pretend that the face, what I see, at least in the drawing, continues behind the eyeball. The eyeball is going to be above the face. So we're going to use our layers and draw behind it, because we don't want to create that shape on the background. It needs to be simpler. It needs to make more sense. So all right, so I've basically done all that I can do without adding new points. So what we're going to start out by doing is we're going to only add exactly the points that we need to make this happen. So I think simply probably going to bring these points out a little bit, just behind the hair, because the hair is going to be above it, so I can get some clearance. We'll still follow the shape, but we're going to be behind the hair, so that's where I'm going to blend the color. So right here we run into a problem. So if I grab this, I can't really make this shape correct, because this is what happens. It's going to move this. So this is where this convert anchor tool point comes in handy, because now we can just grab only one at a time and make it almost a corner. I mean, it's not a corner necessarily, but by term it is now. So now we can create whatever line we really need without interrupting the line before it, or the curve before it, or the Bezier before it. Same thing here. So we're going to have to add a point right over here, because I can't do all these curves with one point. It can't happen. So we need another. So we could do 1, 2, and then we're going to do 3. So now I'm going to need this anchor point tool, convert anchor point tool again, to mess with this. And then I need to mess with this just to fill, because this is all I have in the image. I could, like, I guess make a face and then draw some more hair up here if you really wanted to, but we're just going to focus on the imagery for the sake of the tutorial of what I have in front of me. And that is all. Alright, so now I'm kind of left with this. So I have the exterior of the face on the outside. But now we have to start shaping. We have to start welding this together. And I'm going to fix the first problem that I've seen. And the first problem that I have seen is that we have this corner point running down the face. The corner point can't run down the face because we have to imagine that everything runs from top to bottom. So if we look at the center as a reference, we're going from top to bottom. So this line is going to go through the middle of the face, through the middle of the forehead, down the middle of the forehead, down the nose, down the center of the nose. I'm going to actually move this a little bit more centered. And then I'm going to take this, and then we're going to further emphasize, we're going to do something like that right now. And then we're going to take this and just leave it right there for now. So right now, as you can see, we are going down the middle, and we're going still down the middle, and it reaches the middle at the bottom. The problem with here is we're not at the very boundary. This line is not, so I'm going to rephrase that. This line, if we look at this point as a reference to what we're doing, this point is going to be at the center of the cheek, right? We can't really change that. If we change that, we're going to mess up the mesh. This is what the mesh did. So the mesh isn't wrong. We have to just fix it. So what we need to do is realize that this point runs from the middle of the cheek down. It's probably going to follow this type of curve, and then it's going to go down the face in line with the middle of the cheek. So this point is where it needs to be. The problem is this point needs to be over here. This point needs to follow the middle of the cheek, goes to the middle of the eye, and above the forehead, or to the top of the forehead. So now that is really what it should look like to start out. And you're gonna run into a lot of these problems. And so now we have the shape. Be a little bit more, logical when it comes to the positioning of the line. Everything is like an array. It's like a globe. You have to follow the path to look natural. We don't want to create weird shapes that look unnatural. The face is very soft. It's very smooth. Things make sense. Everything's symmetrical. We have to be, pretty much perfect with the geometry of the face. So what we need to do now is we need to take this point, move it up here, fix that, and now we need to create another point right here. So now we have that. And I think the secret to the first layer, like the background layer on a painting or the background layer on this gradient mesh, is we don't want to get too complex yet. At some point, we're going to get a little bit more fine, like when there's a lot of detail around especially when we have stuff like this. There's just a lot of detail that goes into that, especially if you want to capture this glitter feeling. You can always add that on top as like a Illustrator, like transparency blend or something like that, or shapes, individual dots maybe, and then with, whatever you want to do to emphasize glitter. But you can always make the gradient mesh more complex in that area to capture more of that finer detail. And we'll get into that if we need to. But for now, on the base layer, the background of the face is very smooth, and we need to stay smooth. So the more points we add, the less smooth eventually it will be. So we have to be cognizant of how many points we're adding. So now we can move on to really continuing to weld this shape into a more finer face plate, face mask. That makes more sense. So I think I'm going to fix this a little bit. I don't like how the middle of the nose is not going down to the middle of her lip right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a line right here. And we're going to follow that path like that. So everything's looking a little bit, you know, a little bit face-like so far. It's building there. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the bone, or, you know, the eyebrow line. So for this point, I'm going to bring this down. We're going to bring this, I think, to the top of the eyebrow like this. And we're going to make this have a small bend like that. And then we're going to bring this point down. Oh, I'm in isolation mode. Don't double click. So I'm going to take my direct selection, my white arrow, and I'm going to now weld this. I'm actually going to bring this up now, because if we see, this line is on the top of the eyebrow, center. This one has to be on the top of the eyebrow. This one wasn't. It was over here. So to make this line make sense, this layer or boundary, this latitude, longitude line to make sense, we need to follow that same symmetrical path. So this line, or this anchor point, needs to go to the top of the eyebrow. And now we're going to run into some more issues, and as you can see, or maybe not, and I'll explain. I can see one starting. So to make this line make sense, let me just fix these before I get into my next conundrum, my next mesh conundrum. So now, this line is going all the way across the eyebrow to the middle, above the eyebrow, and then it shoots down to over here. Now this doesn't make sense, this point. Now this point needs to be at the top of the corner, and this point needs to move over. And I was just like, you could see that I'm like quickly changing tools. If you don't know how to do that, you hit control and it brings up the last tool that you've used. So if you know like you're going to be bouncing off 2 tools, you can set yourself up, and then we're going to actually be doing that later when we fill in color, but you can hit control and bounce back to your 2 main tools that you're using. So when I'm fixing the face, I'm pretty much using the white arrow and the convert anchor tool a lot, and then I'll go back, I'll add a point with the gradient mesh tool, and then I'll go back to this little setup that I find myself getting into. So now, what we're going to do is bring this bad boy up here, and now make that the corner. And this point is kind of just still moving it across. So now we can make this, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to correct myself. I need to even go further. This point needs to go this way. This point I can bring this way a little bit. And then this point actually needs to go to the edge of the eyebrow like that. And we need to keep adding points on the right and moving up and keep fixing the structure of the background of the face. We don't want to lose that shape. So we can add a point where we need to. We can do that. And now we need to add another corner point. Because this line, this is the, I'm going to actually fix this. This is going to be the center of the eyeballs. It's going to be, I'm going to make it dip down. So, alright, so I'm going to quickly explain this part now, because this is an endless train of fixing the mesh. So this line, I'm going to have go through the center of the eyeballs. And we're going to follow the inner part and the outer right here, like this part of the eyeball. We're going to take this part. I don't know what the actual biological term is, but yeah, this exit and this exit. And then we're going to kind of fit the line into that imaginary little horizon, little line. And that's kind of the path we're going to follow. So this one is going to be there. Then this one is going to be about there, but then we're going to have to take this guy. And eventually this really won't make sense, because we're going like, oh, well, why aren't you going like, why aren't there more points here? I mean, there will be. The nose, we're actually going to do, we're drawing right now as if there is, the nose is going to be the separate piece. And the separate piece of the nose that's going to be about following this path that I'm making imaginarily right now. Imaginary path. This imaginary path that I'm making right now with my little tool icon is going to cover the faceplate, cover the base layer. So right now we're just trying to get the flow of the color, the flow of the light on the girl's face. So we're going to follow this exit of the eye. We're going to follow that exit. And now we're just continuing this trend. Again, this area will be covered, but we want the color to move in a certain way. We want it's almost like a topography map. If you ever seen the topographical mountains and raised land, it's kind of similar to that. So again, everyone I've seen other mesh tutorials, and there aren't actually too many, I think, online, which is an inspiration to starting this, and I will get better at explaining as we go along, but we're at the beginning stages here of drawing something realistically. And you could skip along, obviously. I mean, these are long tutorials. If you want to see certain parts, I'm going to have certain parted videos, but for now, we got to start somewhere. So now we have this point in the right spot. This point actually needs to stay where it is, and we need a new point as a corner. Because now the lines that we have are making sense, we do need a new line over here. I'm like lost in space right now. Alright, now we need to get this tool. And we're going to make this line above the eyeball. So about under the eyebrow, above the eyeball. This is the line we're going to follow. Now, some of this, if you're starting out with Illustrator, might seem a little confusing, because this really is more than just using Illustrator and tools. I mean, there's more to this drawing style and rendering style on Illustrator than just knowing Illustrator. You have to understand lines. You have to understand, what makes something look real. Shadows, highlights, detail, face structure, geometry, everything makes sense. It has to make sense for this drawing to look real by the time we're done. So we need to be very careful and very thoughtful of what we're doing with our anchor points and our lines at all times. We're just going to give it a first save. I actually haven't saved yet. That's pretty incredible. But I haven't, I guess, got too far. I've been going pretty slow so I can talk it out. So we're just going to save this in the folder that I have set up for myself. And we're going to continue on from here. This is, actually, you know what? I will definitely end right here as a part 1 video. And that is all. See you later, guys. See you, So I'm going to end this video here. This is going to be a part 1. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you stick around if you're interested in learning how to do this. You can watch someone do it from point A to point B and explaining basically just on the spot thoughts and the way I do it, because if you've seen the what I've shown before, no, I appreciate you watching, because if you were interested in doing this, I'm interested in doing this, and you can watch someone who has done it before and is capable of possibly, we're going to figure out explaining his thoughts on doing it, and as I do it, might help someone learn rather than just watching a quick tutorial that's just very vague and expects you to kind of already know what's going on. But if you watch it from the beginning, maybe we can get the whole point across, because there's going to be multiple layers, multiple problems, multiple things we're going to have to do to get to the complete drawing, and it's going to be hopefully a fun experience. It's going to take a very long time, and I am down. Very long time. It's going to take a very long time, and I am down to do it as long as I hope people who are interested watch, and I hope give me some comments, tell me how I'm doing. Please critique me on my speaking and my presentation of the drawing, and I hope you can enjoy this path with me while we draw a random non-copyright image for the sake of video production. And thank you. My name is Mark DiMattei. I am also Mark Darts. You can follow me on Instagram. That's MARKD_ARTS. And for the most part, that's where I put all my work, other than linking that to Facebook and Twitter when I post. But I will be trying to do more YouTube videos, and this will hopefully be my first one. And I don't know. Let me know what you think. Thank you. And I'm not going to ask you to subscribe yet. I really got nothing, but hopefully we can say subscribe to me later at some point. But here is the end cap. Here we go.